The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Jack Cashill coming up, more on the magical life of Barack Obama. Obama's magical Kenyan mystery trip. And we have been, again, probably the only place that continues, well, in Denver, to pursue the true life story of the President of the United States, because I can guarantee you this much. What you believe is true is a lie. This, ladies and gentlemen, is truly, we've gone to talk to most favorite people this morning, and throughout all of this, in the search for Barack Obama, this guy really is a league leader, Jack Cashill. And Jack is with us, and he's done even more work on now what's dubbed Obama's Magical Kenyan Mystery Trip. Hey, Jack, good morning.
Hey, Peter, thanks for having me. This is like one of those little nuggets you stumble across and you say, Eureka.
I have found it, right? That's Eureka.
Yeah, right.
I don't know, I guess it's worthwhile saying that I don't know who, well, I suspect progressives, politically correct Democrats, and all members of the media continued to believe that Barack Obama's Dreams of My Father, the book is true, his whole life story is true, Mommy and Daddy and everybody going to the airport when he's 2.5 to say goodbye, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the real truth, and of course it's anything but. Having said
right,
that, yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
And it's interesting because lacking, for instance, the resources of someone like a David Marinus, who I'm going to talk about in a second, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington Post editor who spent like 4 years writing Barack Obama the Story, which came out in 2012. He has a full-time researcher, for instance, and a budget that I could only dream of. But what happens is with Marinus and other Obama biographers is they stumble across stuff, and then they open the door, they put it on the table, I'm mixing my metaphors here, and then they walk away. And I'm working on a new book about Obama, by the way, and I was looking to see what Marinus had to say about Obama's grades. The fact is he doesn't talk about them at all. And then he just chastises anyone who dares to. But in looking, just word searching through, my Nook, I came across a passage I had missed before when I read the book. And in the passage, and this is very clear, there's no doubt about what happens. He's interviewing Henry Ferris, who is the editor of Times Books, the publisher that finally, it's a Random House division that finally published Dreams from My Father. The year is almost assuredly 1994, although it might be early 1995, based on the timeline. And Obama sends him the first 2/3 of the manuscript for Dreams from My Father. Obama's in Chicago, by the way, and Ferris is in New York, so the notion that Ferris knows who's writing this book is simply not even worth talking about. And then Obama tells him that the last third is to be about Kenya, which it is, but that he has to go back to Kenya to do some additional research. This is what Ferris tells Marinus. And then he goes presumably back to Kenya, does his research, and comes back with a complete manuscript. Then Marinus interviews Obama in the Oval Office, and Obama confirms what Ferris had told Marinus without any dates. There's no dates involved. So there's only two real possibilities here. One is that Obama took a trip in 1994 and 1995 to Kenya and told no one about it other than maybe his immediate circle. There's only 2 known trips of Obama to Kenya before he became senator. And the previous one was in 92, and the previous one before that was in 88. Or, and here's the real likelihood, and in fact I think we got this one nailed, is that instead of going to Kenya, he went to his local library, he took out the books by Kuki Gallman, the woman about whom the movie I Dreamed of Africa is made. She's been living in Kenya for the last 20 years. She's a writer, and she describes Kenya in loving detail. Now, a year or so ago, Peter, I had done an article based on the research of one of my collaborators named Sean Glasgow, who lives in Colorado, in fact, and who had found this connection. He went into Gallman's books, then he went into Dreams, and he found 50, 100 matching words, phrases, concepts. And now it begins to make sense. So Obama's being pressed to finish this book. He can't go to Kenya, so he just milks Gallman's book for phrases, incidents, people, everything. Vegetables, minerals, birds, fishes, there must be 100 matches that Glasgow found. And that was just in the one book. Not I Dreamed of Africa, but her other book, African Nights, which came out in 1994, the same year that Obama would have been doing this research. So I think we got him nailed on this. I'm sorry. I'm hoping that I'm going to try to funnel this back to Marinus and say, tell us, you start your research, do your job.
Yeah, they won't.
No.
When I read this morning, I went, I loved it. I said, we got to get Jack on. You came on right away. And yet I will guarantee you, I won't guarantee anything anymore. But this is one worth a bet. You won't see it in the national press. You won't see it in the New York Times. You won't see it probably anywhere.
Well, probably not. And yet, here's what's going to happen. Well, I did a piece today. It's in WND.com, and people can look at it.
That's
it's relatively short.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, I'm going to have a longer piece in American Thinker with all of the matching words. All the, the baobab, the bang, boma, samosa, stamba, lanya, tilapia, conga, shuka. Do you think Obama knows what these words mean?
No.
And elephants are seen fanning themselves. Birds trill, insects buzz, weaver birds nest, monkeys mesmerize. These are shared words from both books,
And
there's a Noah's Ark of additional fauna: crickets, crocodiles, starlings, dragonflies, cattle, lions, sand crabs, vultures, hyenas, herds of gazelles, and leopards that can hold small animals, quote, in their jaws. So it goes on and on from there,
I'm always fascinated by your work, and we'll have you back on tomorrow as you increase that as well. But you're the guy that broke it, that Bill Ayers is not just his ghostwriter, he's his writer.
Yeah.
It's
certainly on Dreams from My Father. He picked up other ghostwriters after that.
Yeah. But Bill Ayers was not just he was it's like, when people talk about Jack Kennedy's books, and Jack Kennedy had a very powerful ghost every time. I believe Bill O'Reilly in his books, he always has the guy underneath his name that writes with him. That's his ghost. But
he puts his name on the cover.
Exactly.
O'Reilly puts the guy's name on the cover of the book.
Exactly. That's my point. That's how you do it with a ghost.
Right.
And you, like you have pointed out, you've ghosted because you're a professional writer. But your name appears. Bill Ayers' name does not appear on Dreams.
Anywhere.
But you'd be willing to bet the house that he wrote the book.
He certainly, I would say, did a serious bit of book doctoring.
All right, that's
there's levels of collaboration. I'm right now, oddly, I'm doing 3 books. One I'm writing under my own name. One I'm collaborating with, that is, working with the author, collaborating, writing, chapter by chapter. And the third one, I'm the book doctor. That is, they send me an already finished book, and my job is just to make it read better. So there's the levels of involvement, and that's what makes this a little tricky, because I believe that Obama wrote a first draft, and that he gave it to Ayers, and Ayers cleaned it up and punched it up and made it his own. The trick is, I wonder who did this, the research on the Kenya trip. Was it Ayers or was it Obama? I don't know. It could have been either one of them, but I think my collaborator here, Sean Glasgow, has him nailed dead to rights on this. It's really kind of amusing when you see the parallels.
These guys took this book and did what some people call a lift. They just simply lifted parts of the book, right?
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
What's curious, too, is that when Marinus is interviewing Obama in the Oval Office, which means that Obama trusts Marinus. He trusts that he will do him right. So he's at pains to tell Marinus that this part of the book, the African part of the book, he did not compress. Meaning in other parts of the books he had melded multiple experiences into one. And he got caught with that, and Marinus knew he did that. But Obama tells him, this isn't compressed. This is all based on my 1988 visit, which is probably nonsense, but it's probably hard to disprove nonsense. But Marinus leaves this revelation unexplored. You went back to Africa in 94, 95? Tell us about that trip. We have no record of that. No one knows about that,
And of course,
you've never talked about it.
Yeah, and no one in the press corps is going to sit and ask that question either.
No. And that's, it is, It's shocking, but it's what you'd expect.
Yeah, but it's not. Yeah, there's some new, and we're going to talk to you again tomorrow as well. But we're going to talk to Joel Gilbert tomorrow. Have you seen this new breakthroughs on Stan Dunham, Stanley Ann, Obama's mother? Have you read his life story?
I'm familiar with it. I'm not sure I've read the whole life story of the grandfather. You mean?
Yeah, the Big Stan, or were they called Gramps?
Yeah, right. I know the biography. I didn't know there was a life story about him. Is there?
His mother committed suicide in 1926, and his father abandoned him, and he had to go to El Dorado, Kansas. And he's really a psychologically, and you feel sorry for him, young guy.
Oh, by the way, the locals call it El Dorado.
Okay, El Dorado, Kansas, yeah. And
they insist on mispronouncing it, so don't get in their way.
I'm very sorry. But about him punching out the high school principal?
Yeah, right.
You knew all this stuff? I didn't know it.
Yeah. No, he had a troubled adolescence, yeah.
And then he becomes like a lot of those young men in the Depression. He becomes a drifter, and he hops the rails, and then he marries Madeline or Toot on the night of her senior prom.
Yeah, yep.
And against the wishes of her father, and then they have the little girl that they name. He names her his name, Stanley.
Right.
And
there's a little narcissism going on there.
No, but it's weird. But they talk about this guy's life, but then they really roll into Stanley Ann, who is Barack Obama's mom, and she wants people to call her Ann.
Right.
And by this time, she has been, at 17, apparently, this is what Gilbert now believes, she was already posing naked for Frank Marshall Davis.
Uh-huh.
Do you believe that as well?
I have, I am of two minds about that, and I'm looking to be convinced, although the evidence is pretty compelling.
And then she meets, she claims she meets Barack Obama, who she met in this Russian language class, who never marries her, and he's married to he has a wife and 2 children back in Kenya.
Right.
So, and it doesn't have anything to anything, but is she having sex with both Frank Marshall Davis and Barack Sr. at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. And then the question is, who's the actual father, which is, I know Joel Gilbert has explored that in some depth.
Yeah. But then Obama, as a kid, Barry, is abandoned by his Kenyan father.
Right.
And then at this point, if they're married, Barack Sr. is a bigamist, but they're not married. And then he gets abandoned again by his father. And he only sees Senior, in 68, he sees him once, he's about 8 years old.
Yeah.
And then Senior dies drunk, right? He dies in a drunk driving wreck, but he's wrecked a bunch of cars.
Before.
And so Anne remarries this Indonesian guy, and at 65, she marries Lola Saturo, and they're in Indonesia. And there's people that are writing that I never knew, why does this matter? But she hires this transvestite in Indonesia. Have you seen any of this stuff?
Yeah, I've seen those pictures, right. I know her story, yeah.
Evie.
To be the nanny, right.
Yeah, the nanny. And
Barack was ahead of his time.
Yeah, well, now, in 2012, did you know that Evie shows up again as she's a homosexual hustler at this time. She's a prostitute. She's broke.
I think someone straight publication actually did the New York Times or someone did an article on her, yeah.
But they say that he's bullied as a kid, and then she has a baby girl and takes Barry back and dumps Barry on Toot and Gramps. And again, this pain of rejection. There's this interesting psychohistory, and at that point, Gramps almost immediately takes Barry to meet the black communist Frank Marshall Davis.
Yeah, he was also a pornographer with a case for preteen girls, but otherwise.
Yeah, why would you take him? Right, why would you take him? And I didn't know he wrote under the name of Bob Greene. His
book, Sex Rebel Black.
Sex Rebel Black, that's right, yeah.
Right, pure pornography.
And he talks about a couple of three-way sex sessions with his wife and a young girl named Anne.
Yeah, right.
God, this stuff is so crazy.
He also talks about a 3-way with a couple from Seattle.
And that's her. That's Gramps and Toot.
Well, presuming that that he's telling, his Sex Rebel Black is fictionalized. It's something of a novel, but it's clearly based on his own experiences.
But of all the names to pick, the young white girl whose name is Anne.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, it's
that's great. That's great stuff.
What a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive.
And we'll talk again tomorrow when you tie more of this up at the Magical Mystery Tour, right? I'm stumped at this stuff. Of course, I've been stumped at most stuff this morning from reading Robert Gates and but I just you just come to your end every once in a while. I go, these people, these are absurdists. They're running the show.
Yeah, in fact, I would recommend the book. I just got halfway through now, and is the book by the whistleblower in the Fast and Furious case.
Oh no, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that.
It just came out, and it shows you how these people work, and they are utterly, totally indifferent to the truth.
I'm sorry.
And that is something that you have to keep in mind whenever they open their mouth or say anything at all. I'm
gonna put you on hold. You'll talk to Casey, and we'll talk tomorrow. Thanks, Jack.
Okay, super. Take care.
Thank you, Jack Cashill, and also we'll talk to Joel Gilbert tomorrow on this. Nobody wants to listen to a Jack Cashill. They don't want to listen to him. You know why? Because I think they break the fantasy bubble, or it takes away from the message of Barack Obama. A guy like Jack Cashill, he'll never see Brian Williams in the evening news. It's just not going to happen. A guy like Robert Spencer is never going to be on Meet the Press and talk about, the failures of the Bush administration tied into the failures of the Obama administration. You're not going to hear that. You're not going to see that. Nobody's going to, he's not going to be able to talk. I remember when I met Robert Spencer, he was being attacked as a racist, and they would say these horrible things because he was really principally speaking out about Islam. That was like 13 years ago when I first met him with Jihad Watch. Gauze, the same thing. This guy, Alan Kerwin, coming up, I've never spoken to him before, but he says things you're no longer allowed to say. And, of course, the ability of the politically correct. And as I mentioned, if you go back, and, George Orwell had it all, and he had it all before anybody else had it. But that term, black-white, and you have to read the essays of Orwell and know Orwell's politics at the time. And when he was talking about, he wrote 1984 and 1948. He just flipped the numbers. And that's really what he did. He was watching the Soviet Union. And in most cases, he was watching the Soviet Union. In Animal Farm, he's watching the Soviet Union. He's writing about the Soviet Union. The Snowball the Pig is Trotsky. And so you watch this stuff. Black-white is a great word. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the color of one's skin. But the best example I can give you recently in the press of Orwell's term black-white is George Zimmerman, the white Hispanic. Black-white's a word. It's not about skin color. It's not about, night and day. It's black-white. Words, Orwell tells us, mean what Big Brother says they mean. They don't mean what you think they mean. And now we're going to move into this now. Words mean what I say they mean. It's important. Jack Cashill. Now, Jack Cashill is one of those guys that seeks the truth about the true story of Barack Obama. And he has now broken through into another area, and he has dubbed it, and I think rightfully so, Barack Obama's Magical Mystery Kenyan Tour. And this stuff about Obama taking advance money from Simon & Schuster and never delivering a book and just I'm just a flat-out con. And then, really, the king of swing is Joel Gilbert. I thought this is a great way to go out. And Gilbert's come through again, too, on the Dreams of My Real Father. And I said, how about coming on and taking calls? And Gilbert jumps on that with both feet. I love guys like that because they want to have conversation about their expertise. I'm Peter Boyles. Without further ado, we go back to this guy. He went out of the ballpark yesterday. I'm a huge fan of his. Jack Cashill, who is a writer, more of a political investigator, and has just done some of the very best work on the life and times of Barack Obama. Please say good morning, Jack, and welcome back. Good morning, sir.
Hey, Peter, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I read again last night, I read the entire piece on the Magical Mystery Tour into Kenya. And, I was talked about it earlier in the 5 o'clock hour here on 710. You would think something that's this significant would at least maybe bring the New York Times or the LA Times or the Washington Post or someone's attention to the fact that this is yet another scam. If you and I were betting men, how would you bet the attention that's going to be given this?
Well, I'm having a longer piece come out Monday in the American Thinker, which will go into much more detail about how we can essentially prove that Obama did not go to Kenya, as he told his editor he was going to do to finish the book, but rather went to the local library, or his Barnes & Noble, picked up a copy of Kuki Gallman's African Nights. This is the same woman who wrote I Dreamed of Africa, which was the 1991 book that was turned into a movie with Kim Basinger. And then just pillaged the book for words, phrases, and anecdotes, and then inserted them fully into Dreams from Above. I'm talking at least 50 examples. Mm-hmm. And, it should be the great literary scandal of our century. Yeah. We've made literary scandals that this poor guy, James Fry, with like a million little pieces. Remember this?
Yeah, of course.
And then there's the guy, the teacup guy. I can't remember the title of his book. Yeah. He had a big 60 Minutes expose. This guy had a charity in Nepal or someplace.
No, I thought he was in Afghanistan.
Someplace in that part of the world. Yeah.
How about how about the guy that did Howard Hughes?
Clifford Irving.
Clifford Irving. I met him.
Is that right?
He did this wonderful book. It was a novel, and it was about Tom Mix and Pancho Villa. It was a great book, and of course, that part of the rumor with the legend of Tom Mix is that he'd been south and fought with Pancho Villa, and he was very. He was engaging, and and you're looking at the guy knowing damn well he ran a scam, but he was cool,
Right.
But that's right. There was another one. Who was the woman that went on Oprah and said she had found a 6-year-old junkie? Remember that woman?
Oh, I think that was Janet Cook.
Okay.
She was a reporter for the Washington Post.
That's right, yeah.
And then there was even, if you remember, there was Jason Blair, writing stories about, Texas fields from his Brooklyn basement apartment, for the New York Times.
Yeah.
Stephen Glass of New Republic fame, who made up stories whole cloth.
Yes.
But literary scandals protect some people and expose others. A good case, I can't stand to see her on television, is Doris Kearns Goodwin.
Yeah.
She got totally busted on a plagiarism scandal.
Yep, she did.
And it barely affected her. She had, she blamed on her assistant. Well, what's her assistant doing writing the book, Same thing with Maureen Dowd got busted.
Well, that's one I remember, yeah.
And, she lifted a column entirely from some poor blogger. Yeah. And, and was back on got like a hand slap and was back at work 2 days later.
Why don't, we had a columnist here that got caught lifting and why, I think to myself, this is your job to write stuff and, I get to write once a month. You can't be going around knocking other people off because there's too many smart people, that say, wait a minute, I've read all of this before, or, gee, doesn't this sound very much like, and that's what you've done. That's beauty. I should say that Jack's book, I've read many of Jack's books, but you're one of the first guys to put it together that Bill Ayers, the guy in the neighborhood, Bill Ayers, to a high degree of probability, played what role in the other book that was written by Barack Obama?
Well, in Dreams from My Father, and in fact, I was the first, and it was sort of a lonely outpost in the fall of 2008 because the unfortunate part, Peter, and you don't understand this, is that our friends on the right didn't want to have anything to do with me.
Yeah. Did you go on a speaker? Because your voice just come back to wherever you were because your voice went into an echo. I'm sorry.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Absolutely, much better. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
In 2008, when I first came out with the thesis that Ayers was the co-conspirator on Dreams from My Father, what truly disappointed me, because I first wrote about this in mid-September 2008 when it could have still made a difference, is that the respectable right totally turned their back on me.
They did.
If not trashed me,
mm-hmm.
For daring to say such things,
What do you think? I said this in the 5 o'clock in the open. Now it's been, I don't know, 9 years, 10 years. We were dubbed birthers, which was, in essence, being called a Klansman or a racist, and it's like the Holocaust deniers. Now the people who deny climate change are called deniers. This ability of the progressive to use words, to change words. But after this long journey, and we have Gilbert coming up, and Jack, you're really great at this. Why won't anybody bite the apple?
Well, I understand why the people on the left and the left center won't. Because they're thoroughly corrupt. They're all in Fort Lee, New Jersey today, where they have a story they can finally cover.
We're losing your voice. Please, because I hear it. And,
okay.
There you go. Thanks. I'm sorry.
I was going to say the media are all in Fort Lee, New Jersey today.
Yeah.
They're too busy. Well, but the respectable conservative media, by the way, they're starting to come around. Emmett Terrell and American Spectator just did a piece on it, on the Ayers-Obama connection, and the most recent issue. But in the fall of 2008, people like the National Review and the Weekly Standard, who have some influence in Washington, had the potential to break the story wide open. All they had to do was to run a big story, a cover story, ideally, that said, who wrote Dream for My Father? Mm-hmm. They could just raise the question. Mm. But they chose not to do that. And not only did they not do that, they attacked people like me and others, like Joel in the blogosphere, who made them uncomfortable, just like the Tea Party makes them uncomfortable, and pro-lifers make them uncomfortable. Can't we just stick to tax issues? You've heard this 1,000 times. You know what I'm talking about. It's pretty distressing because if we had a vigorous conservative press, we wouldn't have to worry about the major media.
Yeah, I come back to, I think because political correctness and the liberal left now have the hammerlock on the press, that the great fear, and like I said, they've cartooned against me in the Rocky Mountain News and the Denver Post about being a birther, and when I call them, and I'll call the cartoonist or I'll call say, well, why don't you come on the radio show and we'll discuss it? And they either, in most cases, don't return the call, but if they do, they will say, I will not appear on your hate show, which is another way. No, I'm serious, it's a heart attack.
Oh, yeah.
And this is another way that I don't have to come in and face the facts. Now, the part of what you have done, and I think this is so wonderful, take us to back when Barack Obama, he's approached to write after he becomes the Harvard Law Review's first black president, and this literary agent comes to him. Pick it up there if you would.
Yeah, her name is Jane Distell.
Again, we're losing your voice, Jack, every once in a while. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm just must have bad connection today. Her name is Jane Distell, and she's a hustling young literary agent out of New York. She secures a contract with Poseidon, a Simon & Schuster imprint, for $125,000, which is crazy high for a unknown person. But that's the price. That's how far affirmative action can get you in America. And he sets out to write a book, Obama does, on race and voting rights. And he's given a very generous 18-month timeline. I usually get 3 or 4 months, by the way. And he fails to meet it. He has one excuse after another. They extend the contract. Simon & Schuster finally cancels it. Now we're into middle of 1993. Times Books, a division of Random House, offers him a new contract, a smaller one, and he starts all over again, now on a memoir. Sometime in 1994.
What happens to the $125,000?
Well, my best sources say that they asked for it back, and he pled a student debt, and they finally just sort of forgot about it.
But weren't we told that he was a scholarship kid?
Yes, and this is the uncertain part, because after a while he was making a lot of money. You know, he should never have been in debt. In Chicago, we know that, for instance, once he was elected to the state senate, for instance, he was making $60,000 for that. Chicago University was paying him $60,000 to be an adjunct, which is incredible.
And he was not a full in spite of saying he was a professor.
No, he was an instructor.
Yeah.
And that's a crazy salary for an instructor. And then he was also working at a civil rights law firm, and they were probably paying him $100,000. So and Michelle was making $100,000 in their own. So they're making probably $350,000 by 1995 or six. You know, before that, they're still making comfortably in six figures between them. They don't have any children. You know, how can you be in debt? You know, how can you not pay your bills back? Well, they're not, because they travel all over the world and they go on vacations. He goes to Bali for a month to try to write, and he can't.
Yeah. Now, again, this is wonderful work by Jack Cascio. So, and Barack Obama takes off, of all places in the world, Bali. Bali, hi. So he goes, right. I'm sorry, winky, winky. So he is offered the opportunity to work on this thing called Project Vote, right?
Right.
And that's his other excuse for not hitting the deadline.
That's right. That Project Vote interferes with his deadline. He misses the deadline. Simon & Schuster cancels. He gets a new one. So now we're into the middle of 1994. And this is where the story that I'm telling it in WND yesterday and in American Thinker on Monday picks up. And this is as reported by David Maraniss, who's the Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer, wrote a book called Barack Obama, the Story. It came out a year and a half ago. And really opened a lot of doors, but it didn't open them all the way, like in this case. So according to Maraniss, he talks to Henry Ferris, the editor of Times Books. Obama submits the first two-thirds of the book, but without the Kenya part. And then he tells Ferris that to finish the Kenya part, he's got to go back to Africa to do research, fact-checking, history, all that sort of thing. Then later, when Maraniss interviews Obama in the Oval Office, Obama confirms the same thing. He says, yeah, I had to go back and do fact-checking, history, blah, blah, blah. This is either about the middle of 94 or later, maybe even as late as early 1995. Well, the fact is, no one has ever acknowledged that there are more than two Kenya trips. The one he took in 1988, which he wrote about, allegedly in dreams, and the other one in 92 with Michelle. And now there's no dispute about these.
Yeah, and
now we either have a third trip that's been unaccounted for, or he was lying to the editor at Times Books, and I think he was lying.
Yeah, I'm obviously. And then, of course, this half-brother pops up in the last 2 months and says,
right.
Wait a minute. And he puts a stop on everything. So here it is. So he takes the job, misses the deadline. Simon & Schuster extends it, as you say. The summer of 92, he and Michelle go to Kenya, and they were married in October of that year. And, and then he takes off for, of all places in the universe, Bali for a month to finish the book, and nothing happens, right?
Correct. He's not a writer.
All right, Jack, hang on, please. I got to take a hard break.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.